Welcome back to another episode of A Week Around Women's Hoops. I'm Jamae, and let's get into everything that has happened in the women's basketball world. We have to start with Athletes Unlimited since it officially came back this week, and things look a little bit different. Instead of just the team colors, each team now has a name. The new team names include Gold Rush, which is led by Bria Hartley, Glow, led by Nalissa Smith, Rhythm, led by Lexi Brown, and Eclipse, led by Aaliyah Crump. And I have to say that Aaliyah Crump put together a really good team, as they're 2-0 currently. Through the first 4 games, we've had 4 different MVP ones. Odyssey Sims had a hot game last night with 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. And also last night, Caitlin Chin had a big game where she put up 18 points and was 7 for 7 from the floor, meaning she didn't miss a shot. Then we had Asia Taylor, who put up 22 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 stocks, which is steals or blocks, on 7 and 11 from the floor, balling. And lastly, well, really, she was the first one. We had Tina Charles, who is new to AU, put up 17 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist, and 2 stocks. Moving on to our other pro basketball league, Unrivaled 1v1 tournament is officially back, and the bracket just dropped. So, go build your bracket. But when I look at this bracket, there are a few round 1 matchups that I'm interested in. We had Courtney Williams versus Veronica Burton, Jackie Young versus Tip Hayes, Kalia Copper versus Rakia, and De'Erica Hamby versus Shakira. I'm not 100% sure who's going to win it all this year, but just off those matchups alone, I know it's going to be a good time. Also, in regular season news, the Laces are the first team to clinch a playoff spot, and they're very likely to be the number 1 seed, so they'll get a bye week if this holds true. Now, on to the main event, the thing we're all here for, women's college basketball. And guys, it's been a movie. It's still a movie. I am having so much fun watching women's college basketball because there's always an upset on the horizon, and this week was no different. We saw 6 different upsets, and let's run through them. The biggest matchup of the week was very much unranked Minnesota beating number 10 Iowa Hawkeyes 91-85. Iowa did everything in their power to come back in that fourth quarter, but Minnesota held on. Now the Hawkeyes have officially lost 3 games in a row, and it doesn't really get easier from here since they have to face number 24 Washington in the coming week. Let's see if they bounce back. Then there were 2 matchups that had me on the edge of my seat. The first one is Duke versus Louisville. Duke pulled out the 1-point win on the road in Louisville. Now, this matchup had huge implications because both teams walked into ACC play undefeated. And Duke was on a now 19-game win streak against ACC opponents. It's been an interesting season. We all know they started the year off 3-6, and a lot of people didn't expect Duke to be here, but they found themselves, and it really showed in this last matchup. Louisville doesn't have a lot of things to hang their hat on, but they can look at their free throws shooting and get a lot better. Since they missed 7 free throws and it was a 1-point game, you hit half of them, the outcome is different. But I'm sure they'll clean this up in the next one. Now, the other win that had me on the edge of my seat was Alabama upsetting Ole Miss at home, 64-63. Now, some might call this game controversial. Specifically, Coach Yo from Ole Miss would call this win controversial, as she tweeted, in a now deleted tweet, of course, robbed after the game. Now, if you didn't watch it, you might not understand what she meant. Late in the game, Cody McMahon had a almost clear path lane to the basket. An Alabama player stepped into the way, and you can see Cody decel and make minimal contact to the player. She does. They do collide a little bit. But in my opinion, it really wasn't enough to make that offensive foul call. They all seem to be confused by it. I was confused by it. And that's the thing about basketball. You kind of have to take what it gives you, especially since Ole Miss still had another opportunity to win the game after that. They fouled Diana Collins and she missed both the free throws. So and Ole Miss had a timeout, which they ended up using to drop a play. But the play they drew up, I didn't love it, mostly because Letitia Lattimore she dribbled into two defenders when Christina Waller was like standing right next to her and could have gotten off a cleaner shot. But obviously getting that offensive foul kind of changed the momentum of the game, and I'm sure it took Ole Miss out of it in a way that they didn't expect. So controversial, yes, but you have to play what the game gives you, and Ole Miss just couldn't do that. Now we had some other upsets. West Virginia upset Baylor 70-60. In a really good win for West Virginia, who's trying to make their way to the top of the Big 12. We also had Texas Tech upset TCU 62-60. And that's another good win for Texas Tech. TCU is still at the top of the Big 12 standings with an 8-2 record, but things don't really get easier for them as they're going to have to face Baylor twice before the year ends. So the Big 12 is really shaking out to be something interesting. We will see who ends up on top. The other and last matchup of the night was Maryland upsetting Michigan State on the road. Now, this was a really, 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 really important and imperative win for Maryland, as the Terps have kind of been struggling, and I don't blame them. They've had a lot of injuries that have come. They've had a lot of injuries this season, so kind of thoughts and prayers are with them. But beating Michigan State and then turning around and still beating Nebraska also on the road, those are two really big wins, and will aid in Maryland's case to make the NCAA tournament. We also had some really close matchups between top teams in the SEC. Number 7 Vanderbilt pulled out a close one, and I do mean close, 84-83 against number 16 Kentucky. Michaela Blakes is everything. I keep saying it, but Michaela Blakes is truly who she thinks she is. This is her 5th 30 ball. She's had 7 this season. 5 of them have come against SEC opponents, and honestly, Vanderbilt has needed every last one of them to get them the wins that they currently have. But they've been pulling them out, and that's the thing about the conference. You have to just beat who's in front of you, and Vanderbilt has done a great job of beating who's in front of them since their 2 losses against South Carolina and Ole Miss. Now, on the other hand, Kentucky, they're currently 5-5 in the SEC, and I just want to point out that ever since Kenny Brooks said that their loss against Tennessee set women's basketball back 5 years, they have not beaten a team who's won at least one game in the SEC. So I don't know if Kenny should have said that, especially in this league, when, as I just said, you have to beat who's in front of you. And sometimes that means you have to play ugly basketball. And the road doesn't get easier for them because they will have to play number 4 Texas next. So we'll see when the next time they get a win. Now, another matchup that I think most people were really looking forward to was the rematch between number 4 Texas and number 5 LSU. Texas walked away with a 77-64 win. And honestly, when I talked on the pod, I said I will give Texas the edge because I don't think Rory Harmon ever wants to look like how she did in that first matchup. And she didn't. She came alive, putting up 11 points and 5 assists. Madison Booker obviously led the way with 18 points and 4 assists. But the most important Longhorn of the night had to be Aaliyah Crump, who came off the bench and gave 16 points and 5 rebounds. She is exactly the spark of offense that I feel like is missing when Texas plays. And she just gives them that. And so if she's gonna play the rest of the way, Texas is gonna look different. On the LSU front, it was kind of a rough shooting night for everybody not named Michaela Williams. And it only wasn't a rough shooting night for Michaela Williams because she started cooking when they took Rory Harmon off of her. She ended the game with 20 points on 7-11 shooting. She hit 3 threes and had 2 rebounds. She also had a block, which came after on the first 3 possessions of the game. Madison Booker was cooking Michaela Williams pretty bad. Like, Madison Booker's first 3 shots, she hit all of them, and they were almost in Michaela Williams' face. So she had to get her back with a block to end the second quarter. So that was funny to watch. Rough night for LSU, but I will say if nothing else is true, Jada Richard is the key. You know, LSU only goes so far as Jada Richard has gone, and this game obviously wasn't a good night for her. She played 30 minutes, but she only had 2 points. She was 1 for 10 from the floor. She was being guarded by Madison Booker, which I maybe have to argue that the length and quickness of Maddie kind of gave her a little bit of trouble. LSU really needed Flaugier to come alive, and she ended up the game with 11 points on 3 of 14 shooting. She just didn't have any more to give, and you can start to see the game was pretty competitive through the first 3 quarters. Honestly, through the first 3.5 quarters, but you can kind of see around the midpoint of the 4th quarter where it felt like LSU started to get a little demoralized by the game. Like, their shots weren't falling, they weren't defending that well. It was kind of getting hard to watch, and it felt like both the team gave up and Kim Mulkey gave up. So LSU is going to have to bounce back. They now officially have 3 losses, so it's going to be really hard for them to win the SEC regular season. But I'm sure that'll still give them a good chance in the SEC tournament, but we'll see. Now, the last thing that I want to share is there are currently 13 teams who are undefeated in conference play. Those teams are the Rice Owls from the American Conference, Eastern Kentucky, and ASUN. Rhode Island and George Mason are both undefeated in the A10, and they have a matchup on February 14th. So I'm kind of hoping that both of them stay undefeated till that moment, because I will be tuned in. We also have Duke, who I mentioned earlier, is undefeated in ACC play. UConn is undefeated in the Big East. UCLA is running through the Big Ten. You also had Charleston, who's undefeated in the CAA. The Twins are doing their biggest one. Green Bay is running the Horizon League. Quinnipiac. Oh, I really have to give a huge shout out to Quinnipiac and the MAAC. They handed Fairfield their first loss on, I don't remember what the stat is, but it was crazy. And they went on the road and beat they went on the road and beat Fairfield in a big way. Really, Fairfield had no answers for them. They couldn't fight back. Literally every time Fairfield thought they was going to get an inch, Quinnipiac said no. And so a huge credit to them, which will likely, they could end up on the top of the MAAC. So really big congratulations to them. Miami, Ohio at the top of the MAC. We also have Fairleigh Dickinson at the top of the Northeastern Conference. And lastly, I also have to give a big shout out to North Dakota State Bison, who are undefeated in the Summit League. They literally haven't lost a game since, and I'm sure this is true for all the other teams, but North Dakota is interesting for me because they literally haven't lost a game since like November something. I can't remember the date. I know I looked it up earlier. But anyway, they haven't lost a game in a long time. And this includes, and I love the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, but they beat them. And they did it in a way, you know how I said earlier that Quinnipiac didn't give Fairfield any room to breathe? North Dakota State did that same thing. And then they made a cinematic movie about it. So I do have to give them their 10s for that. They're very likely to end up on the top of the Summit League, and it is going to be well deserved. And that has been another week around women's hoops. I'm Jamae. Come back next week and we're going to talk about, all the things that are happening in women's basketball.